Coming to you from the work desk, we're talking about Kinboshi, and it's time for a quick strike. Hello and welcome back to the Dohyo here on Mr. JWags channel. Now this is going to be a rare non-mid-basho quick strike, a small, tapa-sized amuse-bouche of an episode that we release when we have a topic that may not necessarily need an entire episode's worth of time. So for no apparent reason, I have been doing a lot of research into Kinboshi. Now for those of you who are new to sumo, a Kinboshi is when a Maegashira defeats a Yokozuna. And it is important to note that Kinboshi are not awarded if a Maegashira wins via fusen, which is absence, or hansoku, which is foul. In fact, in the entire research I did for this quick strike, I only found 2 instances where a Yokozuna lost a match because of a foul. Those were Haramafuji in September of 2014 and Asa Shoryu in July of 2003. Now, of course, Maegashira have been beating Yokozuna since we have had, in fact, both Maegashira and Yokozuna, but they have only been officially recognized with official recognition and extra pay since January 1930, so that is where I'm going to start my research. And for those of you who are wondering, a Maegashira gets roughly an extra $270 per Kinboshi per basho for the rest of their career. The all-time leader in Kinboshi was Akenoshima with 16, and our current active leader in Kinboshi is Iron Man legend Tamawashi with 8. So yes, I had been wondering who has in fact given up the most Kinboshi. It is very easy to figure out who has achieved the most Kinboshi from a Maegashira standpoint, but I was wondering from a Yokozuna standpoint, who has given up the most Kinboshi. And when I start wondering, I start charting. So several hours of sumo reference searches later, we have an answer, and the answer is Kitano Umi. Yes, Yokozuna Kitano Umi gave up 53 Kinboshi in his career. But of course, Kitano Umi was a Yokozuna for well over a decade. And rounding out the top 3 are Haramafuji, who had 40, and a tie at third between Wajima and Takanohana with 39. Now, some of the more statistically minded of you might be saying, well, okay, so Kitano Umi was a Yokozuna for well over a decade, and Haramafuji and Wajima and Takanohana obviously did not wrestle as long at the rank. So, isn't there some way to figure out, like, what the percentage was? Yes, there is. So, if you look at Wikipedia, they have done a similar set of calculations, but they've done it with a bit of a blunter bit of math. So, if you look at the Wikipedia page on Kinboshi, they just simply take the total number of matches at Yokozuna and divide it by the total number of Kinboshi. But that isn't really as accurate as we can get, because obviously if you're wrestling people who aren't Maegashira, then you can't possibly get a Kinboshi. So what I did was I went through every single Yokozuna who had lost a match to a Maegashira since 1930, and I figured out how many of those matches were versus Maegashira and did not end in a fusen or a hansoku foul. Now, Hakuho had the most matches versus Maegashira in his entire career, which makes sense because he was the Yokozuna for the longest amount of time. Second place was Kitano Umi. But I don't think we fully understand how long Hakuho stayed at Yokozuna. Not only did Hakuho have the most matches versus Maegashira, but he had more than Haramafuji, Kakadyu, and Kisano Sato combined. So, Hakuho had 26 Kinboshi in his career versus 486 Maegashira total matches for a final Kinboshi percentage of 5.3%. Which means if he faced a Maegashira, there was only a 5.3% chance that he would give up a Kinboshi. And surprisingly, this was not the smallest in sumo history. In fact, the Yokozuna with the best, meaning the smallest Kinboshi percentage, was Tamano Umi. And for those of you who remember, we did a full episode on Tamano Umi checking it out. He had an amazing peak at Yokozuna before other things happened. Just check out the episode. But Tamano Umi only gave up 3 Kinboshi in his entire career in 61 matches for a 4.9 Kinboshi percentage, barely edging out Hakuho. And although we consider Yokozuna to be the most dominant wrestlers in sumo history, there are a surprisingly few number who got under 10% Kinboshi percentage. And the other Yokozuna under 10%, you can probably guess who they are. They are Asa Shoryu, Taiho, Chiyonafuji, and Tamanishiki. Wait, Tamanishiki? Quick sidebar. I know I don't usually do the quick sidebar and a quick strike, but I got to. Okay, so Tamanishiki, you may not be as familiar with because he was way before the modern era. He was the 32nd Yokozuna. He was Yokozuna for 6 years and 12 basho. So yes, we are talking about the 2 basho a year era, and he just made the cutoff for the research I was doing, making Yokozuna in 1933. So yes, if you watch the channel out, you know that I don't really get into the stats before 1958. That was when we got to the 6 basho a year system we currently have today. But yeah, back then only 2 basho a year, and back then it was so long ago we didn't have 15 matches in a tournament, and back then we still had draws or ties in case the match went too long. So hey, and while we're here, double sidebar. So in this research, I could only find one Yokozuna who had never given up a Kinboshi under any circumstance, and this was Tachiyama, who wrestled at Yokozuna from 1911 to 1918, and he only lost 3 matches at Yokozuna total over 14 basho. But as I said, way back 2 basho a year, I don't think this is all indicative of anything going on in current sumo. So he is not in this data set. All right, quick sidebar. And as for our most recent Yokozuna, who we have not mentioned yet in the Quick Strike, Kakadu had 33 Kinboshi over 188 matches versus Maegashira for a 17.6% Kinboshi rate. Teruno Fuji had 22 Kinboshi over 97 matches versus Maegashira for a 22.7 Kinboshi percentage. And Kisano Sato, he gave up 18 Kinboshi in only 43 matches versus Maegashira for a 41.9 Kinboshi percentage. Ooh. And for those of you who might be worrying about our most recent Yokozuna, who are still active, Ono Sato gave up 4 Kinboshi in his very first tournament in 10 matches versus Maegashira for a very even 40% Kinboshi rate. And Hoshodyu has given up 8 in 21 matches versus Maegashira for a 38.1, which puts them currently 2nd and 3rd on the list of Yokozuna giving up Kinboshi, but still better than Kisano Sato. And for those who are interested in the near future, if Ono Sato keeps giving up Kinboshi at this rate, he will pass Kitano Umi's record for all-time Kinboshi allowed in 12.5 basho. And if Hoshodyu keeps giving up Kinboshi at his current rate, he will surpass Kitano Umi in 17.25 basho. But may I say, I do not think our current Yokozuna are going to continue giving up Kinboshi at this rate. For if they do, I'm not sure they're going to be Yokozuna still in 2 years. Ooh, I do love an out-of-basho quick strike, and I hope I wasn't throwing the stats too quickly directly at your faces. Please stay tuned to the channel. I have one more extra surprise episode that will be coming up very soon. But yeah, like, subscribe, do all the things. Interacting with YouTube is the way YouTube experiences love, and we all want a little bit of love in our life, don't we? All right, thank you for joining us on this quick strike.